Legend has it that Neil Armstrong, when he set foot on the moon, spotted a strange glow emanating from a specific area on distant planet Earth. Upon closer examination, the area from where this light came from proved to be located in Southeast Asia, in Indonesia, in Central Java, from a sacred place called the Borobudur. An ancient site plunged into a veil of unsolved mysteries. An area of convergence of ancient wisdom and modern scientific insight. A place so holy that it was singled out as one of the most sanctified spots on earth. The Borobudur, a place where man meets the divine within himself. A place where once a year Buddhists from all corners of the world converge during Vaisak Day in order to commemorate the great moments in Lord Buddha's life. His wondrous conception after his mother had been visited in a dream by a white elephant. His miraculous birth under an Ashoka tree in Lumbini. His renunciation to the world after leaving his father's palace and crossing the Anoma River. And finally, after spending years of an ascetic life and overcoming Mara's temptations, his reaching of enlightenment. The origins of the Borobudur, dating back to the 8th or 9th century, are shrouded in mystery. Some see in it a representation of Mount Meru, which is at the center of the Buddhist universe. Others believe that its design follows the shape of the gigantic diamond world mandala, representing a sacred matrix along which the universe is conceived. From a present vantage point, the ground plan of the Borobudur could be seen as reminiscent of the layout of a computer chip, an integrated circuit, with encoded instructions, conceived to convey an ancient message of wisdom and compassion to a modern world in need. It is the goal of Borobudur Paths to Enlightenment to decode these ancient messages and to translate them into the modern language of multimedia. The approach of the builders of the Borobudur was to translate sometimes rather abstract concepts into a visual language so universally understandable that visitors from all walks of life would be able to relate to it. Following the insight of the Buddha that these often subtle messages needed to be adapted to the stage of advancement of the intellectual and spiritual capacities of his audience. Borobudur Path to Enlightenment chose to offer a number of different approaches on how to best decode the complex contents of its panels. Choosing the explorer's path will enable the user to project himself randomly to any section of the Borobudur, letting him embark from there onto a 3D-like walk along the galleries and explore them panel by panel. In-depth background information will contribute to a much better appreciation of each single panel, many of which will literally become alive. Random exploration and discovery are the driving principles behind this section of the program. Instant interactive access to any of the Borobudur's some 1,400 still-readable panels will provide an invaluable resource for anyone eager to explore the building's message in depth. In a panel-by-panel discovery of the ancient reliefs, the stones of the Borobudur will awaken to new life. Having crossed the Nairanjana River, the prince has the thought of bathing in the river. Pure and without defilements, filled with compassion for all the world, the Muni descends into the river and bathes. After eating what food he requires, the sage throws the bowl into the river. Emerging from the water, a daughter of the Nagas came from the deep below and offered him a resplendent lion throne. But Indra, master of the gods, requested the bowl for himself and took it up to the heavens to worship it. And while the Bodhisattva was bathing, several hundreds of thousands of Devaputras rendered homage by filling the river with aloes and powder of sandalwood and tossing into the water heavenly flowers of many colors. For those unfamiliar with Buddhist teachings, the path of the novice will provide an easy-to-follow instruction into the basic principles of Buddhism and its various schools of thought. The quintessence of the Dhamma, the Buddha's teachings, is contained in the Four Noble Truths. The fundamental principles which rule our karmic destiny are described as the noble truth of suffering, the noble truth of the origin of suffering, the noble truth of the cessation of suffering, and the noble truth of the eightfold path leading to the cessation of all suffering. Another, more sensual way to access the multiple stories told by the Borobudur's reliefs is provided by the episode-by-episode approach, which lets the visitor discover the various segments of the monument in a comprehensive manner. Kinnaris are mythological beings, half maidens, half birds. Manohara is one of them, and her love story with the young Prince Sudana constitutes one of the great classics of Far Eastern fairy romances. Other stories on the first and second terrace tell numerous jatakas, stories of the past lives of the Buddha, during which he accomplished compassionate deeds in his numerous reincarnations in the animal kingdom. This truly interactive tour guide is an eye-opener on the innumerable details which adorn the temple. With incredible attention to detail, the sculptors of the Borobudur have captured the most minute details of their surrounding environments. Trees and plants and the entire fauna around Sudana become alive when he desperately combs through the forest in search of his beloved Manohara. In the wilderness, he finally comes across some ascetics and finds a rishi with whom Manohara had left her ring. The wise man shows Sudana the way to his beloved one. Seekers in search of spiritual enlightenment are expected to circumambulate the terraces of the Borobudur 10 times clockwise, covering a total of almost 5 kilometers. During this pilgrimage, they will successively be familiarized with ancient sacred texts translated into the visual language of the reliefs, which ornate the Borobudur. Those depict the life of the Buddha, his past lives narrated in the Jataka tales and in the Avadanas, and the spiritual quest of young Sudana visiting 53 teachers and bodhisattvas on his search for enlightenment. The panels of the first gallery of the Borobudur retrace step by step the life of Shakyamuni, the Enlightened One. 4 fateful encounters were to change Siddhartha's life in the most dramatic way. First, old age. Next, the horror of illness. The third encounter was with a corpse lamented over by surrounding mourners. Ultimately, Prince Siddhartha came across a holy man, a monk. Struck by the calmness of his noble countenance, the Bodhisattva realized, this is a man who has abandoned the temptations of desire. Would it not be best to be like him? One of the most esoteric parts of the Borobudur Temple consists of the 460 panels telling the story of young Sudana's spiritual quest for enlightenment. After his encounter with Bodhisattva Manjusri, the young man is sent out to meet a total of 53 good friends, each of whom teaches him a facet of the pure life. These teachers come from all walks of life, and among them we find businessmen and bankers, women, a child, and even goddesses of the night.
In a past aeon, called Sphere of Purity, there appeared as many Buddhas as particles in a polar mountain, representing different fruits of knowledge. In that time, a king was born spontaneously from a lotus, and the king had a daughter who was none other than me. I have been a night spirit, an emperor, and other beings including an entertainer. Entertainment represents delight in truth. Since I am following Buddhas numerous as atoms in lens, to see any being as other than Buddha is a false view.
It will be fascinating to see how closely the situations depicted on certain panels are correlated to the text from which the ensemble of these reliefs is derived. The last chapter of the Avatamsaka Sutra, entitled The Gandu Vyuha, or The Structure of the World Compared to a Bubble. Here is the net of Indra, an infinite lattice of connections, a great web, and at each node in this vast web of multiplicity, at each juncture point there is a jewel, and each reflects all of the other jewels, all the other nodes of the network. Indra's net extends through the cosmos, through the countless planets and immense eons that Buddhists recognized millennia before Westerners. The proximity of many of the described principles to the latest findings in quantum and particle physics will provide us with some of the abstract, yet completely meaningfully related imagery we are searching for. The Borobudur, a place where man meets the divine within himself.